In this last segment, we're going to look at some major events and people in the history of Hinduism. The first big event we'll look at is the impact of Islam on the Hindu tradition. This really began in earnest around 1021 when the Muslim Al-Ghazni conquered part of northwestern India. Starting around that time, there was fairly widespread Muslim rule within the Indian subcontinent. This expanded in the 1100s and the 1200s. The most notable event of Muslim rule in India is what's called the Mughal or the Mongol Empire, which eventually swallowed up most of the Indian subcontinent. You can see their kingdom growing in 3 stages, which I can roughly draw on this map for you, and you can draw it along with me. Roughly this much of India was conquered by the Emperor Babur by the year 1526. But it didn't stop there. This was expanded further by the Mughal Emperor Akbar by the year 1605. So he had all the previous territory plus the stuff that he had gained. But it didn't stop there. Yet more was added by the year 1707 by the Emperor Aurangzeb. You can see then that by the year 1707, the Mughal Empire, an officially Islamic empire, covered most of modern India, pretty much everything but the tip, and also some territory that's beyond modern India. Naturally, as Muslims, they believed that Islam was true. They believed that one should worship one God, that one should not use idols. They did not believe in the Vedas and the Upanishads and all the other writings. And so they tried to convert the people of India to Islam. And eventually they converted possibly a quarter of the population. I've listed the end date here of the Mughal Empire as 1857. That's about as long as the very last remnants of it held on. However, after the year 1725, the empire really weakened considerably due to a number of factors, such as wars, famines, religious conflict, other empires carving out pieces of theirs, and so on. Eventually, then, Islamic rule went away. We'll talk about what replaced it in a moment. During this time, to a large extent, despite the incursion of Islam, Hinduism continued on as before. But of course, Islam influenced different elements of Hinduism in many ways. In some cases, they kind of strengthened the monotheistic side of the Hindu tradition. In other cases, there occurred what religious scholars sometimes call syncretism, where you form a religion by combining 2 other religions. Now, Sikhs would strongly dispute this, but again, religious scholars don't always tell you what religious people would tell you about their own traditions. There was a guru named Nanak who founded the Sikh tradition, a very interesting and unique tradition, which you should learn about someday, although we don't include it in this class. Some scholars consider that Nanak was combining elements of Islam and Hinduism together, and by doing that, he came up with Sikhism. Again, Sikhs would strongly dispute that. They consider Sikhism to be divinely revealed. Another encounter that had a big effect on the history of Hinduism is the impact of Christianity upon it. And this may have begun very early. Many Indians believe that the Apostle Thomas, one of Jesus' 12 apostles, landed on the coast in Kerala state, which is down at the tip of India, the lower left, in the year 52, Common Era, and preached the gospel of Christianity to the Indians there, many of whom converted. They say that he established 7 Christian churches there. This is widely believed, and it's actually plausible. There isn't any hard evidence, any physical evidence of this, or really multiple early reports, or some of the kind of evidence we would like to have. The tradition says he was killed in the year 72, and there was a seemingly independent Christian movement in southern India, which was absorbed into Catholicism in the 16th and 17th centuries. Here's a modern Indian postage stamp which features a picture of the Apostle Thomas. Well, Christianity didn't get that far. The Indian subcontinent was not very much Christianized at all. The next much bigger impact of Christianity on Hinduism came with colonialism and British imperialism. To make a long story short, the British were very advanced in technology and in trading, and they used their advanced technology and their wealth to kind of exploit different peoples around the world who were less developed. They founded colonies all over the place. Here's a really amazing map of the British Empire at its height when the English were very proud of it. In the 1700s, they began trading with India. One of their big companies moved into India, and eventually, in bits and pieces, they were ruling most of India, although there were still independent and semi-independent little kingdoms scattered throughout it. During the same time, the end of the 1700s and all through the 1800s, Christians decided that it was really important to spread their message to the whole world. There was a great missionary movement within Christianity, especially in Protestant Christianity. And there was quite an effort to send missionaries to India and to convert Indians to Christianity. Today, about 2.3% of Indians are Christians. It's not a big percent. However, there are more Christians than there are Sikhs or Buddhists. The British are much despised in India today. They were, after all, totally foreign overlords. And there were, of course, atrocities committed. And there were some of the English who really didn't respect the Indians and who had only scorn and derision for Hinduism. On the other hand, they brought a ton of technology to India and the English language. One of the things they brought to India was the printing press. And British scholars also actively preserved and recovered quite a few ancient Hindu texts. A lot of scholars think now that the influence of the British may have stimulated Hindus to focus on the Bhagavad Gita as the scripture in Hinduism. The Bible, after all, is a relatively short book. As we've seen, the sacred writings of Hinduism are vast libraries in ancient languages that most Hindus do not read. Whereas on the other hand, Christians, if they're literate, generally do somewhat read the Bible. Some of them read the whole thing many times. But now, the Gita could be translated into the many modern languages of India and into English, where it influenced people in America and in Europe, and into other modern languages. It could be printed cheaply, it could be carried around, it could be studied and taught in schools. So since this 19th century time, the Gita has been the most beloved scripture in Hinduism. This conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, which began as a very small portion of the incredibly long Mahabharata. Another thing that contact with the British and with Christianity did in India was it stimulated a number of modern Hindu reformers and reform movements. The first one of these notable movements was founded by a man named Ram Mohan Roy, who died in the year 1833. He was deeply influenced by his contacts with British Unitarian Christians. These are Protestant Christians who don't believe in the doctrine of the Trinity, and in general they were also kind of modernistic. They de-emphasized miracles and were concerned to avoid superstition, and they tended to take a more critical view of the Bible. He was impressed by his contact with them in many ways. He eventually argued that there was an original, genuine Vedic tradition which had been corrupted by later influences. And originally, it was all, he argued, monotheistic. And also, he thought the tradition was aniconic. He thought that it didn't use images, that there was no idol worship involved, and that it was mythology-free. In short, he was not a fan of the Puranas. He thought those were corruptions of an original, pure religion. Really, his views kind of mirror how a lot of modern-era Protestants have viewed Catholic Christianity. They think the Catholics added a bunch of stuff that didn't really fit on to the original religion. That's what he thought about Hinduism. So in 1828, he founded a group called the Brahmo Samaj, which tried to purge Hinduism of idol worship and polytheism, and which actually instituted sort of Protestant-style religious services. The Brahmo Samaj never got very far in the sense it never converted very many Hindus, but it was influential for a time, particularly among intellectuals. A lot of later Hindu leaders were influenced by it in various ways, and the Brahmo Samaj still exists today. Another movement is the Ramakrishna movement, founded by this guru, Ramakrishna, who lived from 1836 to 1886. He was a passionate devotee of Kali, the goddess, but he also tried out all the religions he could find, And he came to be a very convinced religious pluralist. He thought that all religions equally well lead to the same place, and people should stick with their native religions. The different religions just call God by different names, and he may have thought that they are also kind of really branches of Hinduism, which is the oldest and greatest of the traditions. He taught that there are 3 levels of devotees. The highest devotee, the most spiritually advanced person, thinks, quote, "It is God himself who has become everything. Whatever I see is only a form of God. Nothing exists but God," end quote. Now that is Shankara talk. It's the Advaita Vedanta view that Atman just is Brahman, that it's really all God. Ramakrishna is widely worshipped in India today, sometimes as an incarnation of God himself. Another thing that maybe is worth knowing about him is that some Western scholars have speculated that he was a repressed homosexual and that he may have sexually abused some of his disciples. This is all hotly contested and much debated in various books. And generally speaking, Indian and Hindu scholars think this is a total outrage, and it's insensitive and horrible and based on misinterpretation. All I can tell you is this: he's a very unusual character. His most influential disciple was a man named Narendra Nath Datta, who adopted the name Swami Vivekananda. His years are 1863 to 1902. He was the first and most important propagator of Hinduism in the West. His career and his fame started at the World Parliament of Religions, the first meeting of that kind ever, which was held in Chicago in the year 1893. This was a meeting of people interested in understanding the religions of the world, particularly the ones we now call world religions. A lot of the people at this conference and involved in making it happen were Christian missionaries who were wanting to understand the religions of the world so that they could convert people to the truth of Christianity. They tried to get delegates from the various religious traditions, and they got some. Somehow, Datta heard about this meeting and invited himself to it and showed up unannounced and was an enormous hit there. He dressed in this strange costume, was this very exotic and impressive person. And he gave several speeches at the World Parliament, and he argued there that Hinduism is the most ancient religion and the mother of all religions. He said, quote, "We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true," end quote. So in numerous ways he contrasted Hinduism to Western religion and suggested that it comes out looking really good, that it's more tolerant, more flexible, and maybe the greatest among equals. Officially, he's also a pluralist, like his guru, someone who teaches that in some sense all religions are the same. The last figure we'll look at is this man. He was born Abhay Charan Day, died in 1977. He adopted the name when he devoted his life to religion of Swami Prabhupada. Before that time, he had a career as a pharmacist in India. Then he devoted his life to God, specifically to Lord Krishna. And he founded kind of a missionary movement to bring devotional Vaishnavite Hinduism to the West, and specifically to the United States. He came to America in the year 1965 and was incredibly active for his last 12 years. He became a major figure in what you can call United States counterculture, the hippies and so on, people who were dissatisfied with traditional Western culture of all kinds and with Christianity and Judaism and so on. And some of them converted and became what are called Hare Krishnas. One book of his, which you see a lot if you go to used bookstores and look in libraries, is an edition of the Bhagavad Gita with beautiful color illustrations and with lots and lots of his own commentary interspersed in it. This type of Hinduism really rejects the absolutism of Advaita Vedanta in favor of a very monotheistic, very devotional theology and practice. Well, there's more to be said about modern Hinduism in India. We'll say more about history next time, as we also discuss Hindu practices and experiences. See you then.